Welcome, everybody. My name is Roxanne Gardner from the Center for Medical Simulation, and we are here for our CMS book club. Today, we are going to be talking about tribal leadership, leveraging natural groups to build a thriving organization. It was written by Dave Logan, John King, Haley Fisher Wright, and released in 2008. Very briefly, the book is about improving team performance by identifying and upgrading the culture of the tribe. Level 1, which fortunately, according to the authors at that time, in their interviews, they felt that less than or about 2% reside in this particular tribal stage. And it's embodied by phrases or themes that are that life sucks in general. And in these particular environments, they find that there's more apt to have some petty theft or some vandalism, or just people are operating in survival mode, just trying to get through the day. And then the second tribal stage is the apathetic victim stage, as they called it. And they estimate about 25% of organizations are in that stage. And that's characterized by my life sucks. And you find in those types of cultures that there's a lot of griping, a lot of dissatisfaction, contention. And so it's clear to see that you're playing the victim. And then stage 3, as I had commented earlier about the lone warrior, this is the stage that's characterized by sort of a theme of I'm great and you're not, so to speak. And so you're out to do your best and to get the credit for it, not necessarily thinking of it as an organizational dynamic, but you're out there to win. And tribal pride is the next stage. As you go up, it's stage 4. And that's where you take on the we're great. And it's not that you're competing and saying, well, you may be saying they're not great, but you're certainly saying that we're great. And the ultimate nirvana is to be in the stage of innocence and wonderment, which is tribal stage 5. And that's a stage that they characterize with the theme of life is great in general. So in that stage, the vision is that your organization is striving towards making a global impact on the world in a very positive way, that your project or your orientation is towards making history within your organization. So those are sort of my renditions of the tribal stages, the 5 stages that they highlighted. They really focus on the importance of the language we use in our behaviors and how we can utilize that to transform and upgrade the culture within we live. So the issue of the culture of your organization, the language and behavior that is displayed and exhibited between each other, personally, professionally, I think can have a profound impact on the environment in which we are working and how we engage with other people.
Well, I was really struck by how incredibly useful the concepts could be to the work that we do in our own team and teams, and then the consulting work that we do. And what I thought was really interesting, and by the way, this is Jenny Rudolph from the Center for Medical Simulation here in Lexington, Massachusetts, is that a phrase, people don't use their words use them. And the idea that how we speak shapes the culture we're in. And as an organizational behavior person, I've thought a lot about that over the years, that every micro conversation that each of us has in turn shapes the culture we're working in, and then that culture in turn shapes how we speak. And so I found their approach on being sort of practical and thinking about how we talk to each other and what we focus on, what we focus our attention on via our speech, made a lot of sense to me in terms of gradually transforming culture.
I'd like to jump off that. This is Leah Cruz. I am calling in from Charlotte, North Carolina, a pediatric emergency medicine faculty member. So I too had a similar reaction. A lot of these concepts seem so usual, regular everyday interactions just between people. And at first I thought, wow, what a dichotomy between this intense focus on processes within our organization, and let's improve our processes, but really peeling back to those layers of, well, how are we interacting as humans? And I like one of the concepts of using this to leverage a way that we can elevate ourselves through these seemingly basic interactions. I thought was so powerful.
That's awesome, Leah. I want to confess I've probably experienced every single type of tribal stage as a culture in a particular organization. And certainly, being in levels 1 and 2 can be quite toxic and just make you feel more diminished and less apt to speak up and share your thoughts and concerns. I think one of the things the author talked about is that most of the world is in stage 3, the lone warrior stage. I would like to venture to say, if I could be provocative, that we're at CMS I'd like to think that we're fully in level 4, fully in. But, sometimes I think we have to reassess our language, reassess our culture, and strive to improve so that we can work together better. So those are some of the things that rang around in my head, specifically reflecting back to where I've worked before and how I'm grateful to be where I am now.
Rox, this is Chris Wilson, Senior Director of the Applied Learning for Performance and Safety team at Center for Medical Simulation here in Boston. Listening to you talk made me think about, how many forces there are to prevent the formation of natural groups in organizations these days, and how many forces kind of run counter to the principles that are kind of promoted in this book. For example, in hospitals, the book cites the excellence of the Mayo Clinic, but in so many hospitals, people are encouraged to kind of show up to work, really not say hello to one another, kind of get right to it, not have a great team plan, not have a great kind of structure and set of processes, routines, mechanisms, cultural mechanisms to bring them together with one another. So there's just all kinds of forces in our hospitals, in our health systems, and in lots of other types of organizations that prevent the formation of groups. And it's so scary to look at organizational design through this lens and say, wow, if this is good, we do so many things to prevent it. And so just to, problematize it a bit here. And I do think the Mayo Clinic is an incredible place that really overtly encourages collaboration. I think this book came out in 2008, right? And that's still happening at the Mayo Clinic, to my understanding. And they really go out of their way to make that happen at the Mayo Clinic in so many ways. I just wanted to throw that, problematized view out into our conversation.
I'm Christian from Switzerland. I'm an anesthesiologist. I really like the idea of this progression from dependence to independence to interdependence, and those stages that we can actually go from one to another. And also, probably as Roxanne and others said, the impact of the culture and the environment that can make you be in the first stage or in the fourth stage. And it's really impressive to see that we can actually be in all stages, but depending on the environment we are in. Now, the question I have to you, because I'm curious to know what you think, is, do you think everyone can reach the 5th stage, or is it something that really depends on, on the capacity of the people?
What a good question. I look at organizational design and system design a lot to find explanations for behaviors, Christian. And I think that, what do we incentivize in our organizations? Are people allowed to be harmonious? Are people allowed to, I'll go back to the same word, harmonize a plan to be impactful and be special? Some of those stage 5 words, so many jobs are about show up, do your thing, and get out of here. And I think post-pandemic, it's even more so. Remote work leads us into some of those mindsets. Not always. There are great ways of connecting remotely, but I do think that lots of people have individual mindsets of, I chose my job because I could do it in a low impact way and get out of there and go home and live the rest of my life. And so many jobs where we do collaborate a lot are overworked type jobs, too many hours, too much commitment involved, So these are some of the forces that prevent some people in some situations from reaching those higher stages, I think.
Christian, I was thinking about this, not surprisingly for me, in terms of sports teams. And I really appreciated the anecdote in the book about the very long time ago, 1980s men's hockey team that won the Olympics from the United States. And to your really interesting question, like, can any team make it to level 5 culture? Life is great. I think it takes a lot of work to get there. So I think with leadership and input and commitment, people can get there. But according to their model, you have to have some core values, and you have to have a noble cause, and you have to have outcomes you're shooting for. You have to have the assets to get there, and you have to be able to do the behaviors to allow you to move toward your noble cause. So I think there's a lot of work that has to go in, like just sheer perspiration to go along with the inspiration to get there. But what do you think?
This is James Lipshaw, instructional designer at CMS. Jenny, what you said about the noble cause there, I think is very much in line with what I've been thinking. You're seeing it through the lens of sports, and I think, unsurprisingly for me, I'm seeing it through the lens of labor. There's a lot of organizations on Earth where simply the product that they are creating does not need to exist. Like, that you work in the widget factory, and the point of the widget factory is to generate profit, but the widgets are not necessary. These go into the kneecaps of little flexible garden gnomes that you put out in your yard, right? Like, and as the director of the widget factory, you want to make more widgets and sell more widgets and make more garden gnomes, but there's no noble cause there, right? Like, it is inherently a profit-driven enterprise. Now, I don't think that organization can ever achieve, as Christian asked, this top level. And there are, to some degree, right? You can become a B Corp, right? And you can be donating your excess revenues to people or places or organizations that need them, right? Like, you can be acting in socially responsible ways and leading organization towards more socially responsible ways of doing business. There are plenty of ways that you can do that. But at the same time, that organization and its mission doesn't need to exist. Now, that is very different from a lot of the space that we work in, which is healthcare. Like, healthcare is good, medicine is good, taking care of people is good, and it's important, and it needs to exist. It's a noble cause. And so I do think, to some degree, there's a fundamental difference in those things. And so if the question is, can every organization get there? I think the answer is yes, if it's socially organized in the appropriate way. Christian, being from Switzerland, may have some more experience with this than we do here in the States. If it's socially organized appropriately, it can be a public good, even if it's a widget factory. But at the same time, I'm not sure that every organization can get there.
James, I'll also throw out the concept of the critical mass that kind of kept ringing up through the book, because this whole concept of maybe we can't, or we're not getting there at this point, but at some point, there's going to be that critical mass effect where enough people are tipping over into the next stage that everyone's going to get there. And where that sort of made me kind of think a lot about was their concept of the leader, and the way that they described the leader was not somebody who was appointed or not somebody who was a superstar, but somebody who demonstrated favorable actions that made people want to be like them. And I sort of think of maybe that's a way that they can achieve critical mass faster, perhaps, than another group, but curious what you all think.
I think it certainly brings to mind, the importance of role modeling. So, walking your own talk, putting your own feet to the fire. And, I think that when we huddle before our instructor courses, that's one of the things that we do remind ourselves, is that we want to walk our own talk. We want to hold each other in high regard and high standards, and be respectful and be curious, and hold the basic assumption, knowing that we're humans and we're fallible and we can slip back and make mistakes. But if we have that sort of warmth and relationships within our culture, then we help each other to get back on track.
But, hi, everybody. I'm Mary Fay, Associate Director in the Applied Learning for Performance and Safety Division in Boston today, but normally from Maryland. I agree in general, Rox, with what you're saying and what other people have said about, the values-driven sort of foundation of all this. But I'm also struck by the fact that it's a really fragile thing, because I've been in organizations that have been at a high level, and with a few personnel changes, with a few changes in external forces, it can be lost so easily. And so, I think the idea of those values that are foundation need to be so deeply held by each individual, and that's such a hard thing to do, because even individuals change over time, don't they? Different developmental stages of our lives, or different things going on in our lives, we can sometimes lose our way. And so I think a lot of this was sort of presented as like, you're in this stage and then you go to that stage. But I think the truth of the matter is it's all messy, isn't it? Because it's all kind of human. And so an organization can move, and an organization can move back, and you can be in an organization that's generally stage 2, stage 3, but you got some little pockets of zone 4s and 5s in there, or stage 5s in there too. So I think it's, it can be a really fragile thing.
I was thinking the same thing, Mary, that it's not necessarily a teleology, like you start at 1 and you're moving to 5, and that's the natural course of evolution.
Right.
Yeah. And also that, in many ways, the sense of interdependence, as Christian said, that is so useful and beneficial to the people who work in the organization. But I think there are also recidivist forces, if I can say it that way. Like, there are, I think, interests that would basically say, like, are people working here liking each other that much and getting along that well and understanding the power that they have by working together, like, is bad for me. In healthcare, I think we can see that actually, where, say, individuals in, say, a management role might say, like, it would be bad if all my nurses got along super, super well and were really well organized and communicated with one another really well. It would be bad for me, actually, as an organization, because I would have a harder time enacting changes that I want to make that they wouldn't necessarily like.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about some of the challenges I think many of us are working with, and one of which is when you have habits of interacting, for example, in co-managing patients, where people don't assume the best of each other and or challenge each other's choices in terms of how to achieve clinical management of a certain patient, instead of looking for ways to collaborate and ways to support each other. In improv terms, it's a lot of either no, but, or yeah, but very little yes, and in terms of meeting each other and helping each other move forward. And I know a lot of us are working in these spaces and trying to make them more level 4, we're great and mutually supportive cultures. I'd love to hear, what people think about changing ways of talking or changing ways of interacting that support that mutual support more from what you've seen or what you do or what gets in the way of that.
Jenny, I love your question. Grace Ng here, Senior Director for Faculty Development Programs at CMS, connecting with you from New Jersey, the East Coast of US. I think, Jenny, what that really struck me, I think that in my own experience, when we do those things of mutual support, when we exhibit those behaviors, I think a lot of people in organizations, especially if they were in stage 1 or stage 2, don't recognize it as a deliberate act of mutual support. Many people would just say, oh, Grace does this because she's a nice person. So they attribute it to personality instead of a specific strategy. So I think what might help in my own experience is to say what you're doing, do it, and then tell people what you did. Jenny, I want to give you some mutual support here. What would be helpful? Here's what I think I can offer. Would it help? And then you do the thing, and then you say, hey, try to give you some mutual support. How did that work for you? I think that act in itself, and just having those constant reiteration, naming the moves that we're doing, I think it rolls up to a bigger picture of, hey, we have this culture of mutual support here in this organization. It's not just something that Grace does because she happens to be nice that day or remembers to be happy that day, but it's something that we just do. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I love what you said. This has me thinking about like simple, powerful concepts. My field is organizational behavior. And that is a field that, in my opinion, is quite broken. Actually, there are just too many concepts in it, and it rewards the invention of even more concepts. So I think it would be great if my field had fewer concepts and simpler concepts and worked more deeply with those. But some of the originating concepts in my field that relate to this book and this conversation are when people find meaning in their work, they're much more psychologically healthy. They're much more motivated to do their work. They tend to be more successful in their careers. They tend to stay in them longer. When people connect with one another and find meaning together, that it's exponential. It helps the group. It helps the people involved. And there's lots of social science supporting those findings. And if we design our organizations to help people find meaning, connect with one another, and create meaning together, then that's a great way to design and lead an organization. And if we, so the two powerful concepts, finding meaning and finding connection with one another, and there are pillars of research to go with that. And then a third one is when people are ready for their jobs, trained up, skilled up, they get to practice and rehearse, and then they're much more likely to succeed, find success, and through finding success, feel more confident, have a set of better experiences, and thrive. And if they do that together, they thrive together. If you combine those three concepts, finding meaning, connecting with one another, and being ready for our jobs, and kind of bring them together in harmony with your teams, wow, that's a great way to build an organization. And Jenny asked, I'm still responding to Jenny's question and kind of your answer, Grace. Jenny asked, what do we do that, contributes to the creation of these kind of natural tribes that are successful and successful organizations? We encourage people to train together in ways that are very well designed, and not just show up and train together, but to connect with one another, give time for connection, create psychological safety so that you can connect. And I really see that as central to our work on the training and simulation side, and also central to our work on the ALP side, which also includes routines for teamwork and connection overtly. and other such things, just bringing learning to all the places where it's needed and learning together with one another. So some of what's on my mind.
Chris, I was thinking that you were going to mention, just because what Grace said, you know, that moment of saying like, hey, I'm interested in performing some mutual support here. Like, let's have a moment to do this. What can I help you with? Like, what do you need? Is so powerful. And it's a chemical reaction that'll occur in the wild. And at the same time, if we can turn up the temperature in the beaker, we can make it occur more frequently. And so, Chris, I thought you were going to mention, you know, this idea of structuring those moments throughout the day, which is something that we teach through our ALPS program with the Circle Up program that we do, basically creating a formal space for those moments to exist, where you can say like, we are setting the intention to mutually support one another. Here are the moments throughout the day. Like, it can happen organically too in the middle of the day, but here are these formal moments during the day where we're going to set this intention and do this thing of mutually supporting one another. And that's so powerful when it lands, because like almost the preview that Grace had to do in her moment where she said like, I'm setting the intention of mutually supporting you. Let me get over the barrier of why is Grace saying this to me? What's her motivation here? What does she want out of this? No, my goal is to mutually support you. You can set it formally in a structure and get rid of all of that doubt or confusion about what's happening here. Why is this person being nice to me?
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, James. You said it better than I would. And you can incentivize it, I think is really powerful. You can say, if you do that, if you check in with others and offer them support, we will recognize that as something great that you did. And that will be a factor in your promotions. That'll be a factor in your career. We think that's good. And if organizations can do that, wow, that's really great.
Yeah, I love combining the economic side of it, or even the gamification side of it. I've seen the charts that show how many people have led how many of these mutual support moments that you can see the public leaderboard of. And people do more because they want to win the game of giving the most mutual support. And that's fantastic. It's coming at it from both sides.
Yeah, James, I was going to highlight that what Chris was talking about and what Grace was talking about just brought to mind the whole structure of Circle Up, the intentionality of how that is structured, and the deliberateness with which we move through those steps during the day to intentionally connect and mutually support. I think it's just it dovetails so nicely with the other things that you were saying, Chris. So glad you said the same thing I was thinking, James.
And just to connect what we're saying right now to some of the principles from the book, I think they were saying that in level 2 and level 3, the network structure of teams and how people interact tends to be either duos or dyads or a hub and spoke, where I'm controlling every interaction with my partners and I don't want them interacting directly with each other, because then I lose information and power. Information is power. And in level 4 cultures, that there's a lot more triads, trios, and other groups. So I think what we're saying is when we train together in simulation programs, we're strengthening those connections. When we circle up and have a huddle in the morning or debrief in the afternoon, we're strengthening the connection. You know, just to move to the moment, you know, we are all incredibly busy people. Are we like seriously having a book group? I sometimes think to myself, are you serious? I'm supposed to read this book? And yet I think, hey, this gives me a chance to interact and connect with all my colleagues about things that we all care about in an unexpected, new, interesting way that, you know, can enrich and deepen our connection. So anyway, I just think it's a kind of fun moment of us moving beyond dyads, connect in some way.
Lamont, jump in.
Hello to everyone. I'm really happy to be with you today. So Clément Budéon, and I'm in France, in Normandy, practicing anesthesiology and simulation. And what is really interesting for me is that due to the mindset that I grew up with and a lot with CMS help, it's easier for me to be in stage 4, targeting stage 5 for my simulation practice. However, the environment around me in clinical practice is not as controllable, and I too have the feeling to navigate with other person that are more around 2 or 3 level, and that's bringing kind of competition, even if we're supposed to collaborate. And it's feel harder to develop a culture of level 4 or even 5, and also to find time, because it's in the middle of production of care, and it's not that easy to help everyone to realize the importance of finding some time to get better organized and to change their state of mind. So I'm really curious how it's resonate for you, that feedback, and if you experience that, and how did you manage to go over that issue?
I just want to pause for 1 second, Clement, just a production question. I want to make sure the music behind you is someone practicing a piano and not a recording, so that we don't get a copyright strike.
It's my son.
Okay, no problem.
Someday that will be famous music.
Yes.
And you heard it here first.
As someone who has to move between settings where he's sometimes confronting level 2 type culture, or level 3 type culture, maybe even level 1 type culture, and he likes being more in a level 4, how does he move among those, and what are the struggles of that? I think he was asking us, how those of us who have to deal with that.
I mean, it's the question of culture change that we tackle all the time and think about a lot. And that's a great challenge. If you have, well, is there a desire to change the culture is always a question. If there's no desire that's a shared desire to go in any particular direction, then that can be frustrating. And from the view of one individual who has an idea of how they want to behave, in a humanistic or collaborative way, and nobody else has that feeling for various reasons, that's really frustrating. And I think that how to get others to come along is a really interesting question. From the training side, one story at CMS is, hey, if people are coming to our course from your organization, send 2 people, not just 1. Because if the one person returns back home with all these great ideas, they might feel very lonely if they don't know how to kind of get the group united around some new concepts. And I think a lot of our approaches, my team, the ALPS team, we think about culture change almost exclusively, right? So we're almost constantly tackling this problem. And how can you get the group to design its own intention to go in a particular direction is one of the fundamental questions. How can you gather folks, give them time to think together, give them time to see themselves in a time-space continuum and reflect a bit, and then envision a new way of working, and how to create those moments and routines can be one of the helpful questions, because then we can find a way to create them and maybe make some progress to help folks like Clement and the rest of us kind of make progress.
Yeah, there's such a balance, because on one hand, you can't ask someone who is truly enmeshed in a level 1 culture here, you can't ask someone who's struggling to survive to self-actualize themselves, like they're just trying to survive. They need the basic level of the Maslow's hierarchy, like in order to get through the day. You can't ask them to become this perfect organizational leader. And yet at the same time, you can't impose these things completely from the top down. So Chris, what you're saying, you have to create spaces for people to do this for one another. You have to create incentives for them to do this for one another. And you have to truly collaborate with them and team with them. You can't say, like, this is how we're going to train our nurses. We're doing this training. We're going to go into the nursing unit and do this. You have to bring them into the room and say, what do you need? Like, what's going to get you ready for your job? What's going to help you survive from day to day? Like, what can we do better here?
Yeah.
It can't just be one direction or the other. And you can't ask them to do it by themselves when they're just trying to survive.
Yeah, James, you read my mind as I was listening to Chris talk about that. I was thinking, yeah, like Maslow's. And I've been in places where leaders have come in with these lofty ideas and people were just like, hey, could you just stop mandating overtime and let me have a lunch break? And you've got to get all those baseline structures solid so that people feel safe and secure before they can move up to anything higher.
Yeah, and one of the things I thought of when Clement was talking is, there's within a healthcare system or a hospital system, there's tribes within tribes, and each one of those tribes may have their own cultures. And when you're comfortable in your simulation culture and you're feeling like, hey, I'm rocking in stage 4 and feeling really proud about what we're doing together, and then you encounter a different tribe within the system, and they've been struggling because it's more toxic. Maybe the leadership is just not setting the right tone and not using the right language. And I think one of the things that struck me about the book is that as an individual, you have to listen to what people are saying and what phrasing they're using, their words. And I think that helps you appreciate and diagnose where they are. But then it can help you reflect on, well, how can I reframe what I'm saying in a way that they might be able to appreciate it and it sinks through? Or how can I help them? Getting back to some of the things you were saying, Mary, about being intentional to support other people. And James, not expecting them to change overnight, but providing within your own, ability to touch their lives, support in your language and in your behavior and in your genuineness.
One simple pivot that we've been using for ourselves and teaching people to use is actually getting away from the concept of getting buy-in. It's really powerful. It takes a while. I've reflected on it quite a bit over the past 6 months. And oftentimes, in fact, I personally have taught people, you need to get buy-in for your program, and here's how you get buy-in. And now I'm actually saying, don't use the term buy-in with yourself inside your own head, and don't use it with others, because it's leading you to kind of be too stuck in the ground. You've planted your flag, and now you're trying to get people to come over and stand near it, as opposed to co-creation, which is the term that I'm now suggesting and actually using in my own practice, which is co-create programs with partners, build it together. Yes, you have some core concepts, but build it together. And if you build it together, it will be truly collaborative. If you're trying to get buy-in, then no one else can ever have psychological ownership of that thing, along with you. It's a real struggle, unless they're just a pure follower, which I don't think a lot of people are, especially not leaders. You got to co-create it with them. And so that's a little pivot of phrasing that you can use with yourself to kind of make collaboration happen better for yourself. And Clement, I think we're still all riffing on your great kind of honest question that you asked.
Connecting back to the book and the concepts in level 3 and level 4. So level 3 cultures, which feature I'm great, and level 4 cultures, which feature we're great. I think one of the big shifts that your comment underscores, Chris, is if I'm in a level 3 mindset and I'm in a level 3 culture where I'm great, proportional to my formal power, my informal power, my ability to influence unilaterally, I must get buy-in for my excellent ideas. Versus if I'm moving to a level 4 culture, it's all about how do we co-create this excellence, whether it's a product or a service or a winning team or a fair labor practice, in in fact, on that note, one of the heroes of the book, the labor leader, maybe one of you remember his name, shifted from I'm working for XYZ and my job is to pound management and win for labor to I'm working with labor and I'm working with management. So I do think that idea of co-creation, and that they don't talk about this all that much in the book, but I think what you're saying, Chris, is moving toward more win-win solutions where there's an expanding pie and there's expanding opportunity versus my gain is your loss type of world.
So, to me, I think that can maybe help mitigate some of the challenges that Clement so well describes that I too see in my own clinical practice. It's a very different world, a very different culture, because once we can see, we meaning the collective group, can see the progress and it becomes more tangible and less so something that's talked about, I think it's easier to then have that in this momentum and a cycle that self-propels.
I think also to both Leah and Jenny's points, I do wonder and have a concern that I think current systems of incentivization greatly discourages people to have that co-ownership approach that Chris is talking about. For example, in academia, institutions still give out Teacher of the Year award, Researcher of the Year award. So I think that actively encourage people to say, I'm great, but you're not. And also encourage people to say, I have this great project. You're all going to come and work for me on this project. That I would like to see institutions give out team awards a lot more. Some do now, but I think that's not the prevalent or predominant mode of incentivizing people. Imagine if this whole system is changed for promotion and tenure to say this whole team worked together and they achieved this and recognize all the individuals on the team as opposed to naming one person or naming the leader. Because I bet, even though I, know about these great concepts mentioned in this book, if the system is working against me currently, I think people are going to have a hard time leaping from level 3 to level 4, as the book had mentioned. I don't know what to do about that.
Grace, it's such a great, it's really a scientifically supported observation in the field of organizational behavior that we build systems of incentives and we don't totally anticipate the impact of those, what it grows and what it shrinks, what it allows and what it abolishes, and I think you're bringing up a really powerful point there.
Yeah, the idea of it actually creating like a perverse incentive to say, we want people to work together and do this team stuff, but the way that we're rewarding it is doing exactly the opposite. There's a concept in design thinking that is what the system does is its intention, or the goal of the system is what it does, which is to say, it doesn't matter what your intention was designing the system. The thing that it outputs is what it does. And so if there's a disconnect between those two things, right, like if the academic system is encouraging people not to collaborate, not to team up, not to work together, then that's what the system's designed to do, because that's what it does.
Yeah, it's so funny. It just made me think, James, about the struggle to place yourself in the list of authors on a paper that you may be collaborating on with other people. And the reward academically is first author or last author, right? But all the people in the middle get smushed in whatever that effort was is essentially meaningless because that's not what's looked at. And it would be really interesting to find an academic institution that really intentionally valued every member of a publication team.
Interesting, Rox, in the tradition that I came from, I totally agree with you. In the tradition I came from, there was really only one author acknowledged. There was no senior author acknowledged.
Right. It was just the first author. Right.
So
Big
that
tech.
that mentor author, guiding author, conceptual leader author often wasn't recognized at all. So the senior author, when I came to other fields out of organizational behavior, I thought, oh, that's good. They recognize senior authors. And everybody's right. It really guides team behavior. If you're only acknowledging one author on an authorship team, guess what that does for team behavior around papers? It gets very weird and not teamy.
Roxanne, I'm just thinking as we move toward the end, I wanted to just say something aloud that I think we haven't. So I think one of the main points of this book is that culture is determinative of organizational performance, of retention, recruitment, so many things that our organizations care about so much right now. And the other thing they seem to be saying really clearly is how we talk to each other is a primary driver of culture. And I, of course, like that message because I think part of our noble cause as a group is how do we create cultures that are transparent, are caring, are looking after each other by being curious and respectful about each other. So I like the alignment, of course, between this book's values and this group's values and noble cause, I think.
Yeah, I got to say, I think that we're pretty great. And when we get to work with folks like Saqib and Clement and Christian and our friends at our affiliates all around the world, I tend to flip into thinking that the world's pretty great. Which is not always how I see it all the time, but I tend to think that the world's pretty great when we get to work with these folks. So I think we're doing a pretty good job.
I agree, James. Simulation people make tribes, and they make some pretty great tribes, and applied learning people make great tribes. Circle Up people make great tribes in organizations. And I think when those tribes are working well, they connect to others and attempt to lift up the system. And I do think that's what our organization tries to do, and it makes it great to come to work every day because that's where we connect around that. Without that, wow, I would miss that tremendously. And I don't know if the makers of Sour Patch Kids have that, although Sour Patch Kids are quite good. Just to pick a yeah, they're quite good. That's a different podcast.
Yes, it's a different podcast, different one. Yeah, and it's really critical the role that the leader plays in modeling and the behavior, the language that's more we oriented rather than I, me, etc. But we as individuals have a responsibility also to model that behavior all the time, and it's a shared responsibility. And the way that people do work together with the leader and other members within the organization, all role modeling that behavior, I think is what's going to lift you up into the next stage. So I would like to thank everybody as we close out this session for all the sharing that you've done, the reflections, how you've engaged with the content and how we've engaged with each other. I found myself very uplifted by the conversation, and I hope it uplifts your spirits and carries you into the rest of the day on a high note. Thank you very much from the Center for Medical Simulation, CMS Book Club.